We're not being given a viable future. How Brexit will hurt British music. The Guardian. From customs holding up CD and vinyl deliveries to visa issues putting roadies out of work, the UK music industry is nervous about what Brexit may bring. From customs holding up CD and vinyl deliveries to visa issues putting roadies out of work, the UK music industry is nervous about what Brexit may bring. Sometimes, it's the little things that make you realize the extent of the chaos will reap. Last week, that's not likely to be a problem this year. Current transit arrangements should remain in place until the end of 2020, while the eventual nature of the British departure from the EU is negotiated. But it will after then. The uncertainty, though, has already started to affect parts of the music industry, whose CDs and vinyl are mostly pressed in Europe. When I get records, some record shops were told by Warner Music, who keep their stock in French warehouses, to place orders by the morning of March 25 to be sure of receiving that company's releases for 12 and April 19, April 12 being the day Britain is currently due to leave the EU. The fear for record shops is that they are a long way down the major labels' list of priorities. They aren't going to. Release campaigns will have to be lengthened to get stock into shops for release day, and, with production costs having already increased for UK companies because of the fall in the pound, tax and customs costs set to increase, and retail margins on CDs already low, there will be a knock-on effect. In short, Brexit's greatest impact on music, though, looks likely to be on the live sector, both on British musicians going abroad, and on foreign artists and fans travelling to the UK. Take the Carnaces, huge groups will have the resource to make this work. It will be a hassle, as well as Carnets, musicians will need visas, too. The industry has. Tom Gray warns that Britain is facing a perfect storm of musical crises, not just Brexit, but also the declining revenues from recorded music, the continuing closures of small venues and the loss of music education programs in schools. Kids simply aren't. The problems will not be confined to British artists. The lobbying group, in the classical sector, venue bookers are starting to report that musicians are beginning to demand payment in euros, making them more expensive to book as the pound falls. John Summers, the European classical world is hugely integrated. It's not just music. The irony is that, for now, some people are doing very well out of Brexit. One major label is. For most people in music, the situation is one of grim uncertainty. I haven't taken it. Before you post, we'd like to thank you for joining the debate. We're glad you've chosen to participate and we value your opinions and experiences. Please choose your username under which you would like all your comments to show up. You can only set. Please keep your posts respectful and abide by the end. If you spot a comment you think doesn't adhere to the guidelines, please use the report link next to it to let us know. Please preview your comment below and click post when you're happy with it.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park, pot.